Welcome back to the Soulful Sales Show. It has been a while since I have released a new episode. It's actually been 2.5 months, and that is exactly what I'm here to talk to you about today. Welcome to the Soulful Sales Show, where we talk about believing in the value of your offers, getting them in front of your right people, and selling more of what you do in your unique way. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. It feels like ages since I have sat down and spoken to you, and that's because it has been a while. So this episode really is a bit of a kind of update as to what's been going on, why I disappeared for all this time, and what is happening next for the podcast. And I'm definitely going to talk a bit about radical prioritization, capacity, energy in my business, and making decisions to make my life easier, even though they might not be the most strategic decisions. Let me start by sharing about why I disappeared. So this episode is going out to you at the start of the final quarter of 2024. And because we still have a whole quarter left of 2024, I don't want to make judgments about how this year has been because this year is not over. However, if you have been in my world, you may have heard me share that this has not been the easiest year. It's been quite a challenging year. And actually, I am going to do a full year in review for my members of the $7 Soulful Growth Club. So if you want that, I will share more nearer the time when I do that. I do see that the challenges of this year have given me a lot of important lessons and helped me to change things in my life in a really important way as well. And at the same time, it has been a challenging year. So when did I last? I think the last episode of this podcast went out at the beginning of July, after a period where I'd had a really hard time with my mental health. I was coming out the other side, I was feeling a lot better. But I think what was going on for me, actually, I know what was going on for me, is that after, a few challenging periods like this earlier in the year, I was really, really mindful of my capacity. And a lot of things I could have done or felt like I probably did have the energy for, I was really nervous about committing to and keeping up with. And so I dropped the ball on a lot of things in my business. I guess when I say a lot of things, the core stuff like serving my clients, serving my members, absolutely fine and continued to do that in the same way. It was really the visibility piece. So the podcast and showing up on Instagram, showing up on social media were two big areas where I dropped the ball. And I'll be honest, at first I didn't intentionally decide not to keep up with the podcast. And I always say that it's so much easier when we do intentionally decide, because instead of it still being in the back of our mind, like I should do that, I haven't updated the podcast, or I should tell people what's going on, or I should make a plan for that, we've just decided it's okay and I'm pausing. So I just want to share that because it is okay to pause, but often, like I did, we take a long time to make that decision that it's okay, and we try to kind of force through or push through or think we're going to decide later, and it actually takes up a lot more energy and capacity than it needs to as a result. So I don't remember the specific process, but I do remember at some point thinking, you know what, this is an intentional decision. It didn't start intentional, but now it is an intentional decision. I don't have to announce it. I don't have to tell anyone about it. I'm just not going to release the podcast for a while. As much as I love connecting with you through the podcast, I wasn't feeling connected to the podcast. It was feeling like I had to put a lot more work in to figure out what I wanted to do with it and what I wanted to say on it. And it also felt like not the kind of core part of my business that I needed to focus my energy on. So I have a lot of people in my audience who are limited on energy and capacity for a variety of reasons, whether that's health stuff, neurodivergence, family, responsibilities, all the things. And actually, I just ran the 3rd annual Soulful Sales Summit in September. And we had a beautiful panel discussion where we talked a lot about running your business alongside these kind of considerations. And I think if there's it's not the only thing, but it's one big theme of this year for me has been accepting the mess. And I think anyone who has gone through a kind of messy period in their business where despite what they want it to look like and despite what their goals and their dreams are and all this stuff, life has other ideas and it all just feels a bit mess and chaotic. I'm sure a lot of you will resonate with this, and you don't want to admit it. You think, no, you know what? Next week I'll be more organized. Next week I'll be less busy. I mean, have you seen this meme online? It's like being an adult is constantly saying next week I'll be less busy until you die. I mean, sometimes I do feel like my life is like that. It's not just about being busy though. It really is about mental capacity and what I have the brain space for, what I have the capacity for, what I have the energy and emotions to hold. That doesn't make sense, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, big theme of this year has been real kind of messiness. And I think it's taken me a while, but I think I'm really starting to just accept that a bit more, because as much as I talk in my business about choosing ease, following flow and all of that, and I still believe in all of that, and actually in some ways I believe in it more than ever, life isn't all easy and life doesn't always flow, and it can feel really, really hard, and sometimes it all gets on top of you and something has to give. So I guess this was the space I had been in and then was recovering from at the point at which I stopped podcasting. And it didn't feel like the easy choice to continue podcasting. It didn't feel like it was flowing. I had known for a little while that it was a bit of a, you know, when you have those things in your to-do list that actually take up more mental energy thinking about starting them than the other things. The podcast had really become that for me, and I knew that I needed to figure out what I want to do with it, and I needed some time, and I actually even thought about quitting it altogether, but I gave myself a break, and I think that was a really good decision because it allowed me to reflect on it without it being constantly on my mind. In fact, I didn't even think about it for a while, and then when I was ready to think about it, I considered it again. And the conclusion I have come to for my podcast is that I was making it too complicated. So a few months back, I started a YouTube channel. I have been recording my podcast episodes on video for quite a while now. And especially when I have a guest, I really like to release the video. I like to use the video, or I like to think that I'm going to use the video to create like social media clips, snippets, reels, things like that. But what I realized was that recording the podcast on video is a huge barrier to me recording it. It is so much easier to just sit at my desk without filming myself, without looking at myself on the screen. I think something changes in my brain when I'm looking at myself on the screen. Obviously, you can record video without looking at yourself, but it's really hard not to, isn't it? And thinking sometimes I don't care how I look, but sometimes I do care how I look, and thinking I have to put makeup on and stuff like that. I mean, I do actually have makeup on right now, but it feels still so much easier just talking to you on the mic and not recording the video. The editing is easier when you don't record a video. And I also won't then have this feeling in the back of my mind that I should be using it more strategically. I should create a reel. I should put it on YouTube. I should do this and that and the other. A while back, I decided I wanted to get super strategic with my podcast. I wanted to create like SEO rich blog posts. I wanted to focus on the YouTube channel. I wanted to do videos for every episode. And what have I done with that? I did create a YouTube channel. I did do videos for every episode for a while, but I don't create any blog posts for my podcast episodes, and I avoid recording the podcast. So the decision I've made going forward is to go back to basics. And I was thinking about when I first started my podcast, and actually this has only just dawned on me as I'm recording this, but I think it was around this time. I'll have to double check this. I think it was around this time. How many years ago? 6 years ago. My son was a baby when I started my first podcast called Creatively Human. And when I was podcasting then, it felt very, very different to how it feels now. And I was reflecting on that. And I think one of the things was that I was a beginner then, and I was willing to do it really imperfectly. And I used to just sit down and often The best episodes that I recorded were the ones that were totally off the cuff, that I had no notes for, or that I had a very rough outline for, and just spoke and would see what would come up. I never recorded video back then. I often actually sat in my wardrobe because the clothes hanging up in the wardrobe would absorb the kind of echoiness. And yeah, I want to go back to that. I want to go back to it not having to be a really strategic part of my business. In fact, I do think it is really strategic because I do think that you connect with people in a really powerful way through voice on a podcast, but I don't have to do all the bells and whistles. I don't have to record a video. As much as I wanted to, it's clearly not working for me. And it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to recalibrate. It's okay to rethink things. It's okay to change the way you do things. So I do have some ideas of things that I want to talk about going forward, and I do plan on releasing weekly episodes again, but I'm not going to hold myself to high standards with it. And I will potentially rethink this in the future. And I'm just going to see how it goes, basically, how it feels to just rock up, hit record on the audio and not have a video and not have it all planned out. And it feels like a really good decision. And I guess you listening to this, you might not have a podcast. You might not be able to apply this to your own business in that really specific sense. But I do think it's worth asking yourself, in what way is you trying to do it just right getting in the way of you actually doing it? I think that is a very powerful question we can all be asking ourselves. In a perfect world, I would love to have the SEO rich blog posts. I would love to have the YouTube channel. I would love to have the reels and the clips of every single episode. But in the real world, all of that stuff was getting in the way of the content. And I don't even want to call it content. Like literally just me sharing with you, me connecting with you. It was getting in the way of that. It was getting me in my head. It was becoming a real weight on my shoulders and taking up loads of brain space when I saw it on my to-do list. So yeah, I invite you to ask yourself the question, where is you trying to do it just right getting in the way of you doing it at all? And also, I also want to just invite you to ask yourself whether you want to take a break from something as well. Like if you are in a season where your capacity is lower, like I was, and if you were radically prioritizing what moves the needle, as much as a cliched phrase as that is in business, but what is moving the needle the most, is there something you can drop the ball on for a bit? I'm all for stretching our comfort zones and challenging ourselves, but I am not for burning out and making our lives harder all the time, especially when things are going on, when life is lifing. You are only, I would imagine most of you listening to this are only one person, a one-person business. It is not an achievable goal to hold ourselves to the standards of professional podcasters, influencers, whatever, businesses with huge teams and how they show up. We cannot hold ourselves to those same standards. And that is especially true if we don't have typical brains, if things are more challenging for us for whatever reason, maybe not even our brain, but our health, our body, our life circumstances and all of that stuff. So I just want to give you permission to pause as well. And one we did in the Soulful Sales Summit, and I'm afraid you cannot get access to this now. So I'm just going to tell you about it, but you can't actually watch it. One of the sponsors, Ruth Ridgway, did a bonus session on creating and selling business experiments. So like doing a behind the scenes challenge for yourself, then selling it and sharing updates for your followers. It was really such a great concept and everyone was really excited by this. And we did a live Q&A session. And one of the questions that came up was, well, what if we need to take a break from our experiment and we can't update people and, or things aren't going the way that we want, but we've sold this product that we're sharing behind the scenes of our experiment. And we had the most beautiful discussion about being human and about it actually being helpful to people when you are honest about this stuff. You could pretend, you could push through, but actually if you can be honest, and it's a really vulnerable thing to be sometimes, especially if some hard stuff is happening, that can be the most powerful part of it. Like when you are sharing, and I'm this podcast is not like a thing that I'm selling to you, but it's still within the spirit of me, sharing my journey, sharing my learnings and stuff. You're going to learn so much more from me if I'm honest about these times when things are hard and when I'm not coping 100% with everything I've got on my plate and I am juggling, than you would if I just pretended it was all fine all the time. Which is why I wanted to do this episode before we get back into the regular content, because I do want to be honest with you about it. Like, I make good money in my business. I work with a lot of amazing people in my business. I have a lot of offers that I'm selling and all of this stuff. And if I don't share the messy side of that, then I'm doing you all a disservice about what it takes to build a business like this. And actually, hopefully by sharing the mess, it helps you to realize that you can be messy and do it too. So yeah, I think that's all I want to say. And just thank you for being here. Whether you've been here since 2018, when I first started this not this podcast, my first podcast, or whether you're new and wondering what happened, just thank you for being here and thank you for listening. And I hope that your key takeaway from this is that you have permission to take breaks. You have permission to go back to basics, even if it's not the most strategic business decision. And ultimately, this is all about building a sustainably successful business by honoring yourself, by honoring your energy and values, and also the season of life that you are in. It's okay to be a bit messy. And one of my favorite phrases that I share with my clients and I remind myself of often is that I can make magic within the mess. Okay, so let me know if that has sparked anything for you. If you are in my Facebook group, which is only available if you have bought something from me, it's a client and student only group. If you are in there, come and share if this has sparked anything from you, for you, not from you. I'm doing this so imperfectly, and I was really tempted to just like pause then and edit, but I'm not going to edit. This is part of me going back to basics. And actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but I remember with my first podcast, I used to edit it so much. I used to edit out all the ums and ers and pauses and all of this. It actually sounded a bit robotic. And in the second season, I knew I had a baby that was not sleeping through the night and I was really tired all the time. And I knew I had to make it easier for myself. And one of the ways I made it easier was editing it less. And I actually had such positive feedback since I edited it less. Like, people preferred it. So that's a good reinforcement of the message, to do it imperfectly. I forget what I was originally saying, but yeah, thank you for being here. And I look forward to sharing more episodes with you going forward in the final quarter of 2024 and beyond. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Soulful Sales. If you have a moment to rate and review, know that it really does make a difference. And if you'd like to carry on the conversation, then you can connect with me on Instagram at Ruth Poundwhite, sign up to my newsletter at ruthpoundwhite.com/newsletter, or my personal favorite, join me inside the low ticket membership at ruthpoundwhite.com/membership. And keep doing what you're doing, because your work really does matter.